not mandatory, but it's highly, highly encouraged. It is highly, highly encouraged, and it speaks to 5 key areas. The first part of it is ESG considerations. They want capital market operators to take into consideration whenever they are making investment decisions, they are making transactions, the ESG consideration of their activities. Number 2, they want capital market operators and allied players to ensure that there's collaborative partnership and capacity building, which is one of the things we are doing. As Marble Advisory, we are a registered capital market operator. We are duly licensed by the Security and Exchange Commission to be an issuing house and financial advisor. And we believe that encouraging ESG is one of our ways of contributing towards capacity building. To actually enhance your knowledge about ESG. The major point that the Nigerian Sustainable Finance Principle talks about is how to finance principles. You all go through some of the guidelines of the National Pension Commission, PENCOM. There's a lot of encouragement being given to PFAs, to invest in sustainable transactions. When you read about some of the infrastructure projects of the government, they give a lot of considerations towards ESG and sustainability. So SEC is saying to us, we should ensure we come up with transactions like green bonds, like green sukuk, like sustainable bonds, social bonds that will finance priority sectors of the economy and also align with ESG standards to ensure Nigeria, as much as possible, we align with some of the SDG or Sustainable Development Goals. The fourth and key aspect of the regulations of SEC is that human rights, women's rights, economic empowerment, and job creation must always be at the front and center of any capital market initiative. And this also will enhance financial inclusion. And we've seen SEC walking the talk by encouraging the Financial Technical Literacy Committee, to be enhancing financial literacy, across various segments of the country. And they're also encouraging CMOs to also play their roles in ensuring that at all times, women's rights, economic empowerment are key areas that we actually ensure that we implement our strategies upon. And finally, like I mentioned earlier, a key part of these principles is reporting and disclosures. Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, the SEC is yet to make the sustainable finance principles mandatory, but forward-looking organizations, they are already issuing sustainability reports. They are not going to wait till it becomes mandatory either by SEC or by the FRC before they comply, because this is the right thing to do. So let us ensure that we always adhere to all these 5 principles. The Central Bank of Nigeria has also played key roles in bringing forth regulations. They issued the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles, and its compliance is mandatory for all deposit money banks, all DFIs in Nigeria, merchant banks, and all of that. So when you pick up the annual report of a bank like Access Bank, Stanbic IBTC, EcoBank, you see them attach their sustainability banking reports. If you pick up the reports of a company like Jais Bank, you see a very, very detailed sustainability report. So all banks in Nigeria are already complying. And in the major speech by the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria at the bankers' dinner last year, one of the key thrusts of the new regime at the CBN is that they want to encourage more sustainable investments and financing. There are many other organizations like the IFC, like the GRI, that even the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, they are trying to institutionalize G, which is governance. Governance is just an aspect of the ESG principles, but the NCCG, the code that's issued by the FRC, is already encouraging us to implement governance standards. IFC, on the other hand, has issued a lot of performance standards to manage environmental and social risks whenever they are having to finance any developmental project. That is a key consideration. You must align with these performance standards or no deal as far as the IFC is concerned. The GRI standards are structured in a way that organizations can prepare complete reports about their impacts in sustainable development, and they can also decide to select one or two or multiple stakeholder topics that will adhere to or align with their particular goals of the organization that we are talking about. I'm going to round up to allow my colleague to also speak, but there are about 4 key areas of most regulations that you'll be seeing as far as ESG is concerned. Number 1, they try to encourage us to be aware of reporting and accountability. Most regulations are asking businesses to report on their ESG and social performances. Number 2, most regulation requires certification of standards. So many industries are on a regular basis being subjected to standards. In Nigeria, we know about SON, we know about NAFDAC standards, but we are going to be seeing very soon, like I said, even the financial industries and the corporates, you have to align with FRC standards on sustainability. Another key element of most regulations, which we need to be aware of, is that they are heavy on resource management. They want us to promote practices that avoid over exploitation and depletion of natural resources. We hear about Tesla, encouraging us to be using solar-powered homes. They are encouraging us to use battery-powered vehicles, as against fossil fuel vehicles. You are seeing quotas about you depleting the forests, in many areas, and also restricting the usage of water. All of these are to ensure that the planet, which is a key aspect of where we live and a key aspect of ESG, the resources therein are being properly managed. And finally, most regulations will speak to us about environmental protection. So we need to be aware of that. In Nigeria, you have the NESRIA Act of 2007, which prohibits, without any lawful authority, the discharge of hazardous waste into the environment. These things are punishable by regulation. Performance Standard 3 of the IFC ensures and encourages us to be more and more efficient in the usage of energy and water. So most buildings, for example, we saw a very good and classical example by Sterling Bank, where their whole head office is wrapped up with solar panels. The same thing with the EDGE certified BTC, where you use solar panels and more. These are all elements of resource management that we need a lot of organizations to comply with. I will just share these few slides with you before my colleague Baraka moves on. And these are the rules of regulations and some case studies. For example, in finance, most financial organizations, they talk about risk management from an ESG perspective. They talk about transparency and disclosure, and their investor protection teams actually impact, or they make sure that they enhance ESG regulations so that investors are protected. So these are some of the things you see on the financial side. And we have examples of organizations that are heavy on compliance with ESG. I just mentioned Stanbic IBTC, their report is always very rich. Access Bank, they floated a green bond on the London Stock Exchange, on the Nigerian Exchange. BlackRock is one of the largest like Salesforce. These are organizations that have taken ESG compliance to another level. If you look at Apple at their main office in California, they are already saying that they're going to be carbon neutral by 2025, and they're even trying to get there earlier than their target date. So these are all things that we need to be aware of. Regulation is pushing us, but we also have to, as an organization, as individuals, encourage our organizations to be ready to align with the ESG standards, to not wait for it to be mandatory, to seek to understand, what is expected of us as far as ESG compliance is concerned. So I would like to thank you, everybody, for listening to me this morning. If there are questions, please feel free to ask, and we'll be willing to engage you further. Thank you for listening to Marble Capital. I will hand over to the coordinator, Barak. Good morning, everyone.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Akeem Oyewale, for that insightful discussion on how regulations are shaping sustainability practices in different sectors. You have mentioned the energy sector. You've mentioned also about the tech sector and also the financial sector. And one key interesting part for me, which I actually discussed a lot with a friend of mine who is doing a PhD currently, was BlackRock's acquisition of this Ogunlesi's company, right? And I believe that it's a very strategic acquisition in terms of sustainability and for them, because they are now able to integrate the company into theirs, and they are able to now absorb the sustainability practices of Ogunlesi's company. And I'm glad that I saw BlackRock on your slide. Thank you very much for that. So we would like to take questions and answers now. Questions now for Dr. Oyewale to answer. Okay, the first question says, will you send us the slides after the webinar? Yes, we are going to send the slides after the webinar. Right? And you can also get the recording of the webinar after this session. So we'd like to take questions from participants. Please raise your hand if you want to speak, or just type your questions into the message box. Thank you very much. Okay, we're still waiting for questions. Hi, Ayuba Inde, are you speaking?
Yeah.
We can't hear you if you're speaking.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, so somebody is asking, is there a way to abide by these regulations and also be cost effective about it? Do you want to take that, or do you want me to take it?
Yeah, no, I'll take it. I'll take it. Yes. So there are ways of abiding by these regulations and also be cost effective. One of the ways is by seeking to get an ESG consultant that will work with your organization in establishing your principles, the kind of policies you like to adhere to. Very easy for you to abide by regulations. Consultants, you get an expert like Marble ESG Advisory to work with you and be able to help your organization in actually channeling or articulating your compliance standards. Then from there on, it's very easy to continue to implement these regulations without any fear. And it's also going to be cost effective. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that response. So we have another question here. The person is asking, Mr. Habib Kazim is asking, how do we guide against some political ideologies embedded in ESG? So we have greenwashing, we have some nuances that are political, right? Say some ideologies are pushed and all those things. So how do we guide against them when we're trying to also practice ESG sustainability in our day-to-day activity?
Thank you so much. That's also a very, very good question. A lot of people have been asking questions or are afraid, of greenwashing, which is becoming more and more interesting as this area is developing. I think one of the reasons or one of the ways of preventing this is what government is doing by coming up with regulations, by coming up with guidance, by coming up with policies that ensures that we must meet some minimum standards before you can say you are actually in compliance with ESG. As an organization or as a country, you're going to have ratings, benchmark ratings of different organizations against each other. So you know whether your ESG adherence is making you a grade A company, a B-rated company, or a C-rated company. That would engender healthy competition, amongst organizations, and with that, any issue of greenwashing will just disappear with time. So I'm sure with what the regulators are trying to do and what the industry is trying to do, you're going to get this more and more implemented in the near future. I can see there are other questions about whether we offer on this. We are more involved in the ones that are financial related, and we'll be able to assist you if you need information about that, Mr. Anikulapo Afolabi.
Okay, thank you very much. So there's one other question here before we go on to the next speaker. Mr. Ayuba Ayinde, if I'm correct, is saying, is greenhouse gas accounting report a disclosure requirement in the sustainability report, or is it a standalone report on its own, knowing fully well that it has its own standards? That's GHG protocols.
So at the moment, it's a standalone report, based on GHG protocols. However, with what we have of the FRC, and like I mentioned earlier, you should please try and go online and see the exposure draft of sustainability by the Financial Reporting Council. There is going to be, at the end of the day, a coalition or an aggregation of some of these standards, under the FRC disclosure requirements on sustainability. That isn't the case at the moment. So for now, you still go ahead and you report your GHG accounting in line with your industry standards, and in line with the protocols for greenhouse gases emissions. Thank you. You are muted.
Oh,
you are muted.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Dr. Oyewale Akim, for the insightful session. I believe that we have all learned from it. I personally have learned, right? And I believe that each and every person here have taken one or two lessons from that. Our next session would be anchored by Baraka Saba, the head of legal and compliance at Marble Advisory Limited. And she's going to be speaking on the fundamentals of ESG sustainability. Fundamentals of ESG and sustainability for 2024 businesses. She's going to be taking us through this session after this short break. Please stay with us.
As the energy industry evolves, there is a greater customer and industry focus on sustainability, reducing carbon, and reaching net carbon zero. Constellation is here to help. Welcome to Sustainability 101, Environmental, Social, and Governance, or ESG. What is ESG, and why is it important for your organization? The energy industry is evolving at a rapid speed, driven by a combination of corporate environmental, social, and governance (ESG) initiatives, competitive pressures, and compliance with new federal, regional, or state policies. Organizations are exploring sustainability goals in their overall business strategy. Companies are accountable to multiple stakeholders, including investors, customers, employees, government and non-governmental organizations, who want to evaluate a company's impact on the world. In fact, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission a closer look at ESG, starting with E, environmental. This considers companies' energy use, environmental impact as stewards of the planet, and how a company uses resources across the board, specifically scopes 1, 2, and 3 emission sources. Factors considered are energy efficiency, climate change, carbon emissions, biodiversity, air and water quality, deforestation, and waste management. Organizations that do not consider these environmental risks may face unforeseen financial risks and investor scrutiny. Social. The social criterion examines how a company fosters its people and culture, and how that has ripple effects on the broader community. Factors considered are inclusivity, gender and racial diversity, employee engagement, customer satisfaction, data protection, privacy, service to community, corporate giving, human rights, and labor standards. Governance. Governance considers a company's internal system of controls, practices, and procedures, and avoidance of violations. It ensures transparency and industry best practices and includes dialogue with regulators. Factors considered are the company's leadership, board composition, executive compensation, audit committee structure, internal controls, shareholder rights, and political contributions. Transparency is critical to the process, in which some companies emerge as sustainability leaders, others as laggards. Transparent reporting enables stakeholders to gain a clear picture of a company's direction and progression. For example, as well as the goals. A recent Morgan Stanley survey found that 85% of U.S. investors are interested in sustainable investing. ESG analysis and reporting is becoming more prevalent. Incorporating your values and concerns will help drive better decisions and produce positive, sustainable, and societal impacts. Constellation has a full array of tools and strategies to help you build your carbon reduction sustainability plan, both long and short term. Check out some of our solutions at constellation.com/set.
Thank you very much for staying with us. I hope that you have learned one thing or two from that short video. We are going to go next to our speaker now, who is going to be talking about the fundamentals of ESG and sustainability for 2024 businesses, right? During the last presentation, there were some major key elements of ESG sustainability that Dr. Oyewale mentioned. And before we go on to the next speaker, I would just like us to quickly participate in this poll, highlighting each of those key elements. I mean, just list them in this short poll. It's for regulations. So you can just type in your short answers. We have 30 seconds more for this. All right, thank you very much for participating in the short poll, and this is the results. Okay, so we have regulation compliance, we have environmental responsibility, social equity, economic responsibility, and interconnectedness. We have economic empowerment, environmental, social, and economic. Thank you very much for engaging. And we have resource management. Yes, we have resource management. We have people, planet, profit, human rights. We have environment, social, and thank you very much for engaging. And now we're going to be hearing from Ms. Baraka Saba, the head of legal and compliance at Marble Capital Limited.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Okay, so I'll be speaking with us on the topic, the fundamentals of ESG and sustainability for 2024 businesses. The major point in this is how we can embrace a responsible future. So, I mean, in Dr. Hakim's presentation, he had said that sustainability has to do with the consideration of the people, the planet, and profit. So, I mean, the three P's come together in how we can embrace a responsible future. So now, so our outline for today will be the introduction to ESG, ESG fundamentals, evolution of ESG, integrating ESG significance, understanding sustainability, integrating sustainability, ESG trends to incorporate case studies, and then we'll take questions. So before I go on to the next slide, I don't know if all of us have an idea of what ESG is, or this is the first time that we'll be hearing it. If this is the first time that you're hearing about ESG, can you just put a first time in the comment section so that we know how deep we're going into it, or we're just going to go on the surface? Okay, so I'll take it that we all have some understanding of what ESG is. So ESG basically is the balancing of a balanced scorecard, for accessing non-financial implications and impact, as well as risk and opportunities. So the three arms of ESG are environmental, social, and governance. Now, what are the fundamentals? For the E, which stands for environmental, it refers to the company's impact on the environment. This involves the consideration of factors like the carbon footprint of a company, the energy efficiency, waste management, use of natural resources. What's the impact of your action as a company on the environment? Are you part of the people that, these days we've heard a lot about the what's it called now? The climate change. Are you making a positive or negative impact to the climate? And then when we move to the S, we're talking about how a company manages its relationship with all of the stakeholders. So now the stakeholders are not just the people that have put money into the company. They are the employees, those that are working for the company, the customers, the suppliers, and the community at large where the company's operation is based. Now, the social addresses issues relating to labor practices, human rights, diversity and inclusion, employee well-being, and community engagement. So now we're saying, are you a company where you discriminate against a particular type of people? Or you don't take albinos, or you don't take people from the East, or you don't take, things like that are the things that the ES of ESG focuses on. And then for the governance, it refers to the internal structures, the policies and practices that guide how a company is directed and controlled. Now, this comprises of issues like the board composition. What is the composition of your board? Do you have a balance between the male and the female, or do you have an all-male composition of the board? The executive compensation, your shareholders' rights, and generally ethical business practices. Now, let's delve into a little bit of history of ESG. Now, before the year 2000, majority of companies, and even some companies now, primarily focused on the financial performance without placing significant emphasis on the broader impact of their operations. Now, if you remember when I was trying to define ESG, I said it has to do with the non-financial. So that's where ESG comes in. We are trying to say, okay, yes, you want to make profit, but you also need to consider the other factors that we had mentioned earlier. Now, in the early 2000s, there were conversations about CSR, gaining traction, and then businesses started to acknowledge a responsibility that went beyond profit making. Now, a lot of us have heard about CSR. It means that, yes, you are making your profit. You are making profit from these people in the society, but what are you doing in return to them? What are you giving back to them as a company? Now, in the early 2010s, the term ESG began to gain prominence, emphasizing the interrelationship between environmental, social, and governance factors. Investors increasingly recognize that these non-financial factors could influence the long-term financial performance and risk management of businesses. Going forward, between 2010 and 2020, it evolved totally beyond that into a matter of mainstream adoption, with a number of growing institutional investors and asset managers incorporating ESG criteria into their investment decisions. So what this means is that if you do not have ESG, some level of ESG compliance in your operations, you would lose out on some institutional investors. Some asset managers would not come to you to invest with you. And then you know how that would affect your financial performance. So now in the present day, investors are increasingly using their influence to push for stronger ESG practices within companies. Now, sustainability, so because of the transition of ESG over the time, it is no longer a checkbox. It is now a key factor in success, because it now plays a major factor in the longevity of your business, both within the local and the global space. Now, integrating ESG and some of the challenges. For something that we've said has stayed since the 2000s, right? Since the early 2000s, right? There are still challenges in how businesses can incorporate them into their operations, because as easy as we say ESG, there are a lot of things that companies need to put in place for it to actually metamorphose and be integrated into their institutional practices. Now, one of the ways to integrate ESG into business strategies is to embed ESG into the corporate culture. So within the company itself, what are you doing to embed ESG into your operations? Or what's your social, like your staff? What's the composition like? What's their well-being status like? Your governance, how well is your board composition? How well are your board procedures? All of those things are things that you need to put in place. For the environmental, if you're a company that is into mining or into excavation, what are you doing to reduce the effect of your actions on the environment? Some of these things like the Niger Delta oil spillages and things, those are some of the things that ESG is trying to mitigate, the effect that those things are having on the environment and the community where they are situated. Now, setting ESG goals and metrics is another way to strategically integrate ESG into your operations. Now, further down the line, we'll see the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. You need to align your goals to fit those SDG goals. Those are the ways that you would incorporate ESG into your operations that will make you ESG compliant, right? When Dr. Yewale was speaking, he talked about the regulations that are being put in place. Now, some of these regulations will require you to have some of these metrics to do those reports, right? Which takes me to my next point, which is the ESG reporting and communication. Now, we've heard about the GRI, we've heard about the IFRS. These are institutions that have given us reporting outlines, right? So now your ESG, for you to say that you're integrating ESG, you need to align with some of those outlines. There are guidelines for how you can integrate ESG into your operations. And then the communication aspect is where you are releasing. So likes of Honeywell, the likes of Stanbic, they've released sustainability reports, which has shown how they have integrated ESG into their practices. Dangote has also released that, stating how they have contributed to the society where they are practicing and what they've done for their staff, the composition of their staff. A lot of companies have done this. And Jais Bank also has their reports where they have the list, the composition, the actions that they've done to integrate ESG into their practices as well. Now, for every, for most of these things, there are always challenges. They cannot be avoided. So now one of the challenges of ESG integration is data collection and quality. Now, because it is still a developing concept, some of the data that are out there are not, they lack, some of them lack quality. And then the ones that actually that have quality are not readily available for everyone to just have access to. You either have to belong to some society or be a member of some association or things like that, right? So due to this, it makes it difficult for businesses, especially small businesses that are trying to incorporate ESG, to get access to those information that would further assist them to integrate ESG in a proper manner. So the implication of this is that it makes it difficult to monitor, measure, and manage their ESG performance. That's the MMM: monitor, manage, and measure. So if you cannot do those three things, it makes it difficult to integrate ESG into your business strategies. Now we move to reporting consistency. So with reporting consistency, the issue is that there are global reporting standards. There are also local reporting standards. So in situations where a company has multiple branches, right? You have operations in Nigeria, you have some in Cote d'Ivoire, you have some in South Africa, you have some in the United States. It makes it difficult for you to pick which one you want to, which of the reporting standards you want to align yourself with. And then sometimes this leads to, what would I call it now? This leads to some situation where the branch in a particular country that doesn't have as much high standard in reporting would then be performing below par to other to a sister branch in other companies, right? So materiality assessment, that's the next challenge that is faced. Now, what this means is how well are you able to identify the ESG factors that are most relevant? Because of the various industries that we have, it makes it sort of difficult to say, oh, okay, for this industry, this is where we are going to focus on for our ESG factors. For this industry, this is what we'll focus on. So until it makes it a bit technical, right, for you to properly integrate ESG factors into it, because sometimes you now overlook the critical ESG issues, or you allocate resources to issues that are not of material effects to your industry. And now the last challenge that is on in this presentation is the integration to decision making. Now, what this means is, because ESG integration is more non-financial than financial, it makes it difficult. It makes it a bit difficult to convince. It makes it difficult to convince the board or the management of the level of integration that they should ascribe to ESG factors in the process of business, right? So I'm seeing a question in the chat, what MMM means. So I said that it means to monitor, to measure, and to manage, right? So measure, monitor, manage. That's why I said it means MMM. And that was under the data collection and quality, right? If you don't have the proper data, it's like when you are trying to do a feasibility study for a business. If you don't have the proper data and you don't have quality data, it makes it difficult for you to actually measure what your risk or your profits will be. It also makes it difficult for you to monitor your growth and your development as a business progresses. And then if you're not able to monitor monitor and measure, it makes it difficult to manage. I hope that answers that question on MMM. So the significance of ESG in 2024. Now, the significance of ESG cannot be overemphasized, right? I mean, these are just a few, but some of them include reputation and brand value, stakeholders' expectations, improved financial performance, environmental impact, regulatory landscape, enhanced risk management, and access to funding. So with the regulatory landscape, I believe that Dr. Oluwale had explained some of it, because you know that as an organization, you have your regulators. So if you do not comply with what the regulators have put out there for you to comply with, you either are faced with fines, or you are faced with suspension from operations, or in fact, you are totally taken off the list, you lose your license, right? So now access to funding. Now, when you are a company that is integrating ESG into your practices, you are open to apply to some funds, right? Which also would now in turn improve your financial performance, right? So because if you're able to get grants because of how well you integrate ESG into your business, it will definitely improve your financial performance, because then you're able to get access to capital. And then there's also the stakeholders' expectation. Now, if you remember, I mentioned that investors are now becoming more, they are pushing more, right, to the integration of ESG. So there are a level of institutional investors that would not invest in your business until they see that ESG is properly integrated into your company's operations. Right now, there are issues of greenwashing. So some of this, what these institutional investors do, they properly investigate, right? They have sometimes they hire auditors that would actually look through the operations of your company to be sure that you're actually integrating ESG into your operations. Now we move to understanding sustainability. I mean, when Dr. Oluwale was going to begin, he spoke about the people, the planet, and the profit. Now these 3 Ps come together to define what we call sustainability, right? So now, what's the definition of sustainability? Sustainability is the practice of operating a business in a way that meets the economic, social, and environmental needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future, right? So now, the people is where the present comes in, right? You meet the needs of the people that are in the present now. Through economy, that's the profit. That's where you make the profit for them to sustain their livelihood. And then you now do that without compromising the ability of the future generation, which is where the planet comes in. Because if you don't destroy the planet, the future generations would actually have something to deal with. They have natural resources. The water and air quality that they are meeting when they are born or when they are developing is not compromised, right? So now some of the ways of, some of the measures of sustainability include minimizing your greenhouse gas emissions, reducing your waste pollution, promoting social equity, diversity, and inclusion, maintaining long-term profitability, and creating economic value. Now, companies that understand how social, environmental, and governance factors are interdependent are better equipped to handle the complexity of a world that is changing quickly. I mean, we see how the world, always say change is constant, right? So now the world is changing every minute, every second. There's a new change, there's a new regulation, there's a new law, there's a new this, there's a new that, right? So now this is what, when you understand the interdependency of these factors, it makes it easy for you to adapt easily to the world, to the changing world, right? So the integration of sustainability into businesses can be implemented through these SDG goals. Now, the SDG means the Sustainable Development Goals that were established by the United Nations, right? So there are 17 of these goals were established in 2015, right? And if you look to the right of the screen, there is the no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice, and strong institution partnership for the goals. Now, to integrate sustainability into your business, you need to align some of your goals. Do you understand, as a company in with this SDG goal? So you see, some companies will tell you, oh, they are doing this project and it aligns with SDG goals 15, 12, 3, 5, right? What this means is that they've looked at the goals of that institute, of the projects that they are planning to undertake. And they've realized that, okay, these goals are particular, the projects we're trying to do, these are the goals that it will achieve. And this is how it will support the sustainable development goals. So now the steps to integrating these SDGs into your business practices include, number one, right? You need to define your priorities. Now, defining your priorities involves understanding your value chain and the impact that each of the stages has on your business as a whole, and has on the project that you are trying to undertake and the objective of that project. Now, when you are able to understand and define your priorities, you then now take the priorities that you've identified and defined and choose the SDG goals that are most relevant to it. Say, for example, now you are doing a project that involves feeding, maybe doing a charity outreach, right? In that situation, you could have supported the SDG goal 2, you could have supported SDG goal 1, right? You could have supported SDG goal 3. And say, for example, you are making a donation to a school, say a government school, right? Where you maybe give them textbooks, or you give them notebooks, or you sponsor some children's education. You supported quality education in that realm, right? You supported, let's see, you've supported SDG goal 8 as well, because when you have provided we have provided them with education, you have further equipped them for decent work in the future after they are done with their education. Now, the emerging trends in 2024. One of that is the global standardization, right? So there have been continuous efforts towards global standardization of ESG reporting frameworks to provide consistency and comparability across companies and industries. Now, one of them is the International Financial Reporting Standards, which was earlier spoken about by Dr. Oyewale, right? Now, the IFRS has said that, mandated rather, every organization to adopt the IFRS S1 and S2 standards from January 1st, 2024. Right? The Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria has also announced the adoption of these rules from January 1st, 2024. The next emerging trend is the human capital management. Now, there is a lot of attention being drawn to that in the present time, and I'm sure that it will continue like that in the future, with regards to employee well-being, training and development, as well as the impact on overall organizational success. Now, the company's workforce development, well-being, and diversity are critical for the company's long-term success. Right, so a lot of HRs now within organizations are working to ensure that their employees' well-being, training, and development, right? Which is why a lot of organizations now have training calendars for their staff members, where they mandate staff to undergo training, right? And the Securities and Exchange Commission as well, in their ASMA, it also mandates companies, capital market operators rather, to report on trainings that their staff members undergo. Right. So also another emerging trend is the innovation in sustainable finance. Right. So now, one of the innovations is the climate fintech firms. Right. There are a number of climate fintech companies that are being incorporated now to blend financial technology with the principles of sustainability. Right. So this will create an array of eco-friendly investment opportunities, such as green bonds, amongst others, right? So now some of the case studies that we'll look at, some businesses that have successfully integrated ESG principles include Unilever, Tesla, Dangote Industries Limited, Access Bank, right? So now Unilever is leading the charge in sustainable living, through some of their projects. They've published some of this in their sustainability reports. Tesla is revolutionizing the automotive industry. Dangote Industries Limited is very high on environmental sustainability. Access Bank has a high impact on social impact and financial inclusion. Now, some of these businesses, right, there was a publication in Punch, right, on January 1st, 2024, where some companies were ranked, right, by the Analyst Data Services and Resources based on their ESG integration. And some of the Nigerian companies that were on the list include Access Holdings, Dangote Cement, and GlaxoSmithKline, right? They took top spots on that list. However, it is pertinent to note that a majority of them scored higher in the social sphere, right? If you remember, I said that a lot of HR units now are making sure that the well-being of their staff and the development of their staff are key in their development. So a lot of these companies scored higher in the social sphere, followed by the governance, while the least scores were in the environmental reporting, right? However, the average score of the integration of ESG in the Nigerian industry is still below 50. But with the regulatory development that is currently going on, I'm sure that as time with time, right, there will be further improvement in this course. Now, the ESG case studies demonstrate that incorporating environmental, social, and governance consideration into business strategies is not only a moral imperative, but also a pathway to long-term success. I mean, we can see how far these businesses that we've listed here have gone in terms of long-term success, right? There's Unilever. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of us have known Unilever since our childhood days. So that's to tell you how long or how far Unilever has gone, especially with their integration of sustainability. Now, in conclusion, the evolution of ESG in business practices reflects a shift from viewing sustainability as a choice to recognizing that it is a strategic imperative for long-term success, financial resilience, and positive societal impact. Now, while the journey is ongoing, there's continuous development and a growing consensus on the integral role of ESG in shaping the future of businesses, right? The case studies also highlighted, like I said earlier, demonstrate that incorporating environmental, social, and governance considerations into business strategies is not only is also a pathway to long-term success. Companies that embrace sustainability not only contribute positively to the world, but also position themselves to be leaders in their industries. I mean, Tesla is currently a leader in terms of the automobile industry when it comes to the solar power cars. We have Dangote as well. And there's nobody that will not know Dangote in Nigeria and even in Africa at large now. So I'll take questions now. Thank you for listening. Mubarak.
Yes, thank you very much for the insightful session, Baraka. We would be taking questions and answers now. Please, if you have questions for Baraka, please. Action if you want. Thank you very much.
Okay, so there's a question from Charles Toby in this chat room. Is the SDG goals inscribed into the regulatory standards, not just goals expected by organization, or fixed as a law? And if yes, who are the regulators monitoring for compliance? So SDG goals, not all of, they are not inscribed in regulatory standards, they are not completely integrated into regulatory standards for now, which is why I had said that the regulatory bit of it is still developing, right? I mean, if we look at the IFRS S1 and S2, some of them are impliedly inscribed into it. When you look at some of the things that should be done, or some of the metrics that a company should have, right? So, for example, gender equality. There is I don't have it off of the top of my head now, but there is a bit of the GRI standards that talks about what the composition of your board is, right? What the composition of your staff is when it comes to the gender balance. So it's safe to sort of say, yes, it is. With respect to the monitoring for compliance, I mean, like Dr. Yewale had said, the CBN currently regulates the monitoring of the banks, right? Yes, the SEC has released the guideline. However, it is not yet compulsory, but there have been moves, right, to make sure that this become mandated for organizations to follow. Now, the measuring threshold for SDG goals. Now, there isn't exactly a measuring threshold for the SDG goals, right? But there are ways that the United Nations has recommended that you measure how you have integrated the SDG goals into your plan. So for the no poverty, for example, one of the suggested ways is, for example, to look for a charity or to do the charity yourself. You know, companies engage in CSR, feeding the poor, going out and, you know, getting food or getting some sort of provision for the indigent people, right? So those are some of the ways of measuring thresholds. So when you put it in your report, right, the auditors, the ESG auditors, which is one of the things we do at Marble Advisory, would look through the act or the actions that you have taken to see how well you have actually aligned with the SDG goals. And then there's a scoring pattern that some of the reporting indexes are provided, which we use to measure some of this SDG goals integration. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Charles. Sayuba is asking, sustainable finance and impact investing, are these two used interchangeably? And how can one develop a sustainable finance product with respect to this? So sustainable finance and impact investing, they are used interchangeably, yes, but there's still some level of depth to sustainable finance as well as impact investing, right? So now the sustainable finance, you know, we have said that sustainability has to do with impacting the present without affecting the future. Now, they go hand in hand, but there's with sustainable finance, there are some factors that you have to integrate into the practices to say that you are practicing sustainable finance. Whereas impact investing is the notion that investors would have. So, you know, I said that institutional investors would look at a particular type of investment to see whether or not they integrate ESG factors into them. That is impact investing. Is your investment, is it having an impact? And that impact, is it a positive one to the ESG factors or say a negative one, right? So how can one develop a sustainable finance product with respect to this? So now developing a sustainable finance product would require experts, right? Again, it's one of the services that we provide at Marble Advisory, where we have the experts that would help you to come up with a structure, right, that would give you a product that is sustainable in terms of the impact now, its goals, its objective, and the effect it would also have in the future. So after this call, I mean, we are open to receiving your messages, your calls, to further provide you with more insights with respect to sustainable finance products. The social pillar in ESG also speaks to the diversity. How will a faith-based biased organization balance its provision in its manpower and product offering? Now, this is one of the things that when you say faith-based or biased organization, can you expand? Are you talking about maybe an organization that is tied to a church establishment or to a mosque establishment, right? So in terms of that, for that type of integration, it is a bit logical, right? And you know, diversity. So the social pillar is not just diversity alone. There are other ways to integrate the social pillar. So if you're not able to, so diversity, and then again, diversity is not just for the religion bit of it. It also speaks to the gender bit of it. It also speaks to your accommodation of disabled persons, right? So if a faith-based organization is not able to, say, for example, employ a Muslim in its organization, is it employing somebody that is physically disabled? Is it employing, say, for example, an albino? Is it employing somebody from another ethnical group? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So the social pillar is not restricted to one bit of it. It spreads. However, we advise that faith-based organizations incorporate some balance in its manpower. Say, for example, in terms admin staff, right? Somebody that would be in charge of your meals, somebody that would be in charge of scheduling your meetings, that would not necessarily affect the person's religious belief. But what we advise is that you look for other bits of the social pillar to incorporate ESG into your manpower and product offering. Thank you. What are necessary steps companies should take in order to improve on ESG in their various domains? Now, we had said that integration of ESG. So now one of the ways to do that is to look at how you can integrate, how you can align your goals as an organization or as a company to what the pillars of ESG as outlined, right? So for example, your governance, right? What's your board composition like? Those are their primary steps. You take baby steps before you now take the giant leap, right? So you can start with, say, putting up separate dustbins in your company, one for plastics, one for recycling, for the recyclable plastics, one for nylons and other types of waste, and then one for the ones that the food, right, perishables, right? Baby steps from there. You can also start by, do you have an extinguisher in your company, right? That's another ESG factor, right? Another one is, if you are a company that is into gas emission, how are you controlling, how are you reducing your green gas emission into the environment? There are little things that you do that would now, that will metamorphose into the larger ESG integration, right? So this was why I said that you need to understand what ESG factors align with your industry. Do you understand, right? So, I mean, we can only speak on the basics for lack of time here, but if you reach out to us, I mean, through the mails that have been shared with you, we'll definitely put you through more insight into how you can improve on your ESG in your various organizations. Setting ESG goals. Is there a standard available that one can use as a reference to setting goals? Yes, definitely. There's the GRI standards, there's the IFRS that we have said that the FRC has mandated organizations to incorporate. So you look through the IFRS S1 and S2, look through the GIR standards, you look through the SEC framework that had been released, you look through ISSB, all of these things, you can look through them to set your ESG goals. I mean, and then another way to just make it easy for you is to reach out to experts, which we are at Marble Advisory, to help you set your ESG goals in line with your organization's industry, right? So for example, what would apply to a company that is in the banking industry might not necessarily apply to a company that is in the capital market or that is into fast-moving consumer goods, right? So when you write to us or when you reach out to us, we're able to help you align or set those goals in line with what is actually your priority as a company. I hope that answers your question. And I hope that I've been able to answer everybody's question as well.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Barakasaba, for the session. We very much appreciate your wealth of knowledge and your magnanimity in sharing with us. Thank you very much. I want to actually just go back to the last question, the penultimate question that talked about how we stakeholders, when they buy into the principles or the standards, then the next thing is to craft a strategy to go through all of the company, right? I mean, to go throughout the company, the strategy first. And when we're crafting the strategy, you're looking at what's the goal of the business itself, and then how do you align it with global standards for sustainability. And so you don't throw away the goal of the business just because infrastructure where business comes in, responsible work, right? I mean, yes, responsible work and sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, right? So these are how do I say it, principles. These are key elements of ESG. I feel like the third step is to get trainings for management and staff, everybody involved. Get trainings for them, train them, let them understand why it is important for everybody to buy into this, right? Then the next step is to take intentional actions to be inclusive, to drive towards sustainability, right? And examples of intentional actions, like Ms. Saba has mentioned earlier, would be you're doing your recruitment, be intentional about looking for candidates that might be or that are from different ethnic groups, different religious groups, different ability, physical ability groups, right? And this is part of being intentional. In terms of plastic recycling, being intentional could be placing bins in places, or say, placing bins in places where people can actually drop their plastic, or even put separate cans for separate kind of waste, plastic, metals, and all. That's part of taking intentional action. Part of taking intentional action is in the workplace or right? Right, unique, intentional advocacy, and lastly, you measure. And those are key steps for companies that want to integrate sustainability and ESG principles in their day-to-day activities. I would say to finalize that as His Majesty, the King of Land, mentioned at COP28, and I was happy to watch him speak to this, right? And he said the dangers of climate change, greenhouse issues and all are no longer distant risk, right? He said he has seen across Commonwealth and beyond countless communities which are able to withstand repeated shocks, whose lives and livelihoods are laid waste by climate change, right? Surely, real action is the going toll of its most vulnerable victims, right? So it is important for us to also understand that we are all connected, not only as humans, but with all living things and everything that sustains life. And so we need to act responsibly so that our lives, we can live sustainably and act and work sustainably. So finally, I would like to of ESG and its implication on performance and profitability, which is going to be taken by experts across industries and across companies as well, right? So for you to in the chat box now. Also going to be sending it as part of the email I sent after this session. You're going to be getting the resource material for the training. You're also going to get a link to the wait list for the paid training coming soon. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining this 50 years from now, our children and grandchildren would live and have to manage the consequences of our actions or inactions, or the things that we decide to do now. So it is very important for us to integrate sustainability and ESG principles into our day-to-day lives, into our businesses, and so that we can create a more sustainable and better future for ourselves and our generations to come. Thank you very much for joining once again, and we appreciate your time, leaving all the things that you would have been doing to join this webinar. We really thank you for your time, and we're going to be sending the resources across as well. From myself and on behalf of everybody at Marble Advisory Limited and our trainers, I say thank you once again, and see you some other time.